Millionaire's baby screamed for hours on flight, until a poor black boy did the unthinkable. The piercing wail cut through the recycled air of first class like a siren, drowning out the gentle hum of the Boeing 777's engines. Rick Stone, CEO of Stone Tech and self-made multimillionaire, felt every pair of eyes on the plane boring into the back of his Italian silk suit as his 8-month-old daughter Emma's face contorted into an impossible shade of crimson. 3 hours into the transatlantic flight, and the baby hadn't stopped screaming since takeoff. The flight attendant's practiced smile had long since cracked, revealing thinly veiled contempt as she approached, her voice barely audible over the infant's shrieks. "Sir, we've had several complaints. Is there anything else we might try to?" "Quiet her down." Rick wiped sweat from his brow with a monogrammed handkerchief, desperation etching lines around his eyes. His wife Kate was in Paris on business, and he'd foolishly thought he could handle their daughter alone on the flight to meet her. Now, as passenger after passenger shot daggers his way, he realized how catastrophically wrong he'd been. "I've tried everything," he whispered hoarsely, bouncing Emma mechanically. Bottles, toys, walking. His voice cracked with exhaustion. Nearby, an elderly woman tutted loudly, muttering something about people who can't control their children. A businessman in a neighboring seat slammed his laptop shut, jamming noise-canceling headphones over his ears. From the economy section, one 8-year-old Mac Johnson heard the commotion. The heavy curtain separating first class from the rest of the plane couldn't muffle the baby's distress. He shifted uncomfortably in his cramped seat, the threadbare hoodie he'd had since freshman year pulled up over his head. In 12 hours, he would be landing in London for the World Youth Chess Championship, his one shot at a college scholarship. He needed rest before the biggest competition of his life. But as the baby's cries escalated and the atmosphere on the plane grew increasingly hostile, something tugged at Mac's conscience. The memory of his little sister Zoe, now 7, and how only he could calm her when she was colicky as an infant. His mother had called it the magic touch. Before he could second-guess himself, Mac unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up, his lanky frame unfolding in the cramped aisle. The flight attendant moving through economy with the beverage cart gave him a sharp look. "Sir, please remain seated. We're experiencing light turbulence." "That baby's been crying for hours," Mac said, his voice quiet but firm. "I think I might be able to help." The flight attendant's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "First class is off limits unless you're a ticketed passenger for that section." Mac felt the familiar weight of prejudgment settle on his shoulders as she took in his worn jeans, his public school hoodie, the color of his skin. He'd encountered this look countless times before in stores where security followed him, in classrooms where teachers expressed surprise at his advanced placement status, in chess tournaments where opponents underestimated him until checkmate. "I understand," he said, his voice steady despite the blood rushing in his ears. "But sometimes the solution comes from unexpected places." But before the flight attendant could respond, the curtain to first class was yanked back, revealing a frazzled Rick Stone holding his screaming daughter awkwardly against his shoulder. The businessman's normally immaculate appearance was in shambles, his bespoke shirt wrinkled and stained, his eyes bloodshot from exhaustion. "Please," he said, his voice breaking as he addressed no one in particular. "I'll pay anyone who can get my daughter to stop crying." The moment stretched like taffy, passengers averting their eyes from the powerful man's vulnerability, except for Mac, who stepped forward, hands slightly raised. "Sir," he said quietly, "I might be able to help your daughter." For a brief moment, something ugly flickered across Rick's face. Doubt, maybe suspicion, as he took in the young black man in economy clothing approaching him. But desperation quickly overrode everything else. 3 hours of non-stop screaming had brought the multi-millionaire to his knees. "You have experience with babies?" Rick asked, trying to keep the skepticism from his voice. "My little sister had colic," Mac replied, his calm confidence belying his racing heart. "May I?" He extended his arms toward the wailing infant. Rick hesitated only a moment before surrendering his daughter. The entire plane seemed to hold its breath, and then Mac did the unthinkable. But to understand how this moment came to be, how an 18-year-old chess prodigy from Southside Chicago ended up holding a multi-millionaire's baby miles above the Atlantic, we need to go back. Back to when the day began, when two lives from entirely different worlds were set on a collision course that would change them both forever. Hey everyone, if you're enjoying this story so far, make sure to subscribe to our channel and comment where you're watching from. Now let's continue with our story. 6 hours earlier, Mac Johnson had stood in front of the bathroom mirror in his family's small apartment, straightening the collar of his one good shirt. Outside the thin walls, the city was already alive. Car horns, voices, the distant rattle of the CTA Red Line that would take him to O'Hare International. On the counter lay an envelope containing his boarding pass, passport, and the carefully folded letter from the World Youth Chess Federation that had changed everything. "You got this," he whispered to his reflection, repeating his coach's mantra. His fingers, long and deft from years of moving chess pieces, trembled slightly. Behind him, the bathroom door creaked open, and his mother's face appeared, her night shift exhaustion temporarily eclipsed by pride. "My champion," Sarah Johnson said, her voice thick with emotion. She worked doubles as a certified nursing assistant to keep their family afloat after Mac's father had been incarcerated 6 years ago. Every tournament entry fee, every chess book, every late-night practice session had been a sacrifice for her. London won't know what hit them. Mac grinned, though anxiety coiled in his stomach like a spring. "It's just the qualifying rounds, Mom. Don't start planning the victory parade yet." "Mom," she hummed, unconvinced, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from his shoulder. The same way it was just the state championship and just the nationals. She cupped his face in her hands, her eyes serious now. "Listen to me. You belong there, no matter what anyone says or how they look at you. You earned this." From the small living room, 7-year-old Zoe's voice rang out. "Mac, your chess stuff is ready." His little sister had laid out his travel chess set, notebook, and lucky pencil on the coffee table with ceremonial precision. 20 minutes later, Sarah pressed taxi fare into his palm despite his protests. "No son of mine is taking public transit to the airport for an international flight," she insisted. "Text me when you land, you hear? London is 6 hours ahead, so don't call in the middle of the night." As the taxi pulled away, Mac caught a final glimpse of his mother and sister waving from their third-floor window. The familiar tightness gripped his chest, the weight of their expectations, their sacrifices, their love. He couldn't afford to fail. Across town in a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, Rick Stone's morning was unfolding very differently. The panoramic windows of his home office framed the city like a living painting as he concluded a video call with his Tokyo team. "The acquisition goes through today." "Understood. I don't care what time zone they're in." He ended the call with an impatient tap and swiveled his chair to face his assistant Vivian, who stood with military precision, tablet in hand. "Your itinerary is updated, sir. The jet is fueled and waiting at the private terminal. Mrs. Stone's assistant confirmed she'll meet you at the hotel in Paris tomorrow evening." Rick nodded absently, his attention already shifting to the next item on his mental checklist. At 42, he'd built Stone Tech from a small startup in his garage to a global technology company. Time was his most precious commodity, each minute meticulously allocated for maximum efficiency. "What about Emma?" he asked, glancing at his watch. His daughter would normally be with the nanny at this hour, but Marie had called in sick, some family emergency he hadn't bothered to inquire about. Vivian's perfect composure slipped momentarily. "Sir, we've been unable to secure a replacement nanny on such short notice. The agency says, no agency personnel on the private jet." Rick finished, pinching the bridge of his nose. It was a security protocol he himself had instituted after a tabloid incident years ago. "What about Kate's mother?" "Mrs. Astor is still in the Maldives, sir, unreachable until next week." Rick suppressed a flare of irritation. His mother-in-law's perpetual vacationing was a source of ongoing tension between him and Kate. "So you're telling me I need to fly with Emma? Alone?" "Yes, sir, but I've taken the liberty of packing all her essentials and favorite toys, and the flight attendants on your jet are all trained in." "We're not taking the jet," Rick interrupted, a decision crystallizing in his mind. "Book us on the commercial United flight to Paris, the one Kate's on." Vivian blinked, her professional mask momentarily slipping to reveal shock. "Commercial, sir, but security protocols. Kate's already on that flight path just a day ahead. The sooner we catch up to her, the sooner I'm not dealing with this alone." Straightened his cuffs decisively. "First class, obviously, and no announcements. I don't want a circus at the airport." 90 minutes later, Rick sat in United's first-class lounge, uncomfortably aware of the stares from fellow travelers who recognized him despite his attempt at a low-key appearance. Emma squirmed on his lap, fascinated by the platinum credit card he'd given her to play with. His phone buzzed with a text from Kate. "Are you seriously flying commercial with our daughter? If you lost your mind," he typed back, quickly calculated decision. "We'll explain when we see you." "Emma's fine." As if on cue, his daughter cooed and grabbed at his tie with surprising strength. Rick felt a flicker of the unfamiliar pride that occasionally caught him off guard since becoming a father late in life. At 42, with an empire to run, a child hadn't been in his plans. But Kate had wanted a family, and Rick had learned long ago that his wife usually got what she wanted. He bounced Emma gently on his knee, studying her features. Kate's eyes, his mother's chin. Would she inherit his drive, his relentless ambition, or Kate's diplomatic charm? He rarely had time for such reflections in the whirlwind of his daily schedule. Mr. Stone, a lounge attendant, approached with a practiced smile. Your flight is boarding now. We'll escort you through the priority lane. Rick gathered Emma and her surprisingly extensive paraphernalia. How did something so small require so much equipment? The diaper bag alone weighed more than his laptop case. As the first-class passengers were welcomed aboard, Rick felt a moment of misgiving. He hadn't flown commercial in nearly a decade. The flight attendant's recognition was immediate, her eyes widening slightly before her training reasserted itself. Welcome aboard, Mr. Stone. May I help you with anything before takeoff? We're fine, he said curtly, settling into the wide seat with Emma on his lap. He declined champagne, arranged the baby's blanket, and answered 3 urgent emails one-handed before the announcement to switch off electronic devices. As the plane filled, Rick remained absorbed in Emma, oblivious to the boarding economy passengers shuffling past the first-class cabin toward their seats. Among them was Mac Johnson, who paused briefly at the sight of the famous tech multimillionaire cuddling an infant. The contrast between the man's austere public image and this tender moment with his child was jarring. A flight attendant cleared her throat pointedly, and Mac continued down the aisle to his seat in economy, stowing his small backpack carefully. The World Youth Chess Championship had covered his flight, but just barely. His seat was in the last row beside the restrooms, with minimal legroom for his lanky frame. As he settled in, Mac removed his travel chest set from his pocket, a magnetic miniature board his coach had given him for his 16th birthday. He set up the pieces with practiced precision, preparing to review the opening strategies he'd been studying for months. 45 minutes into the flight, as the seatbelt sign switched off and the first round of drinks was being served, Emma Stone began to fuss. At first, it was just whimpering, barely noticeable above the ambient noise of the cabin. Rick jiggled her gently, offering a pacifier that she promptly spat out. The whimpering escalated to crying, then full-throated screaming that seemed impossible from something so small. Rick's expression shifted from mild concern to barely concealed panic as he rifled through the diaper bag, producing toys, bottles, and blankets in rapid succession. Nothing helped. By the 1-hour mark, passengers in first class were exchanging irritated glances. By hour 2, several had complained to the flight attendants. By hour 3, Rick Stone, a man who commanded boardrooms and brokered multi-million-dollar deals, was completely undone by his inconsolable daughter. Back in economy, Mac tried to focus on his chess strategies, but the baby's cries penetrated even his noise-canceling earbuds. He noticed the increasing tension among passengers, the flight attendants' strained expressions as they hurried up and down the aisles. No one seemed to have a solution. As Mac watched the curtain between classes being yanked back and heard the desperate multi-millionaire's plea, something clicked into place. The same feeling he got during chess matches when he saw a move others missed, a solution where others saw only problems, and so he found himself standing in the first-class cabin, extending his arms toward the wailing infant while skeptical eyes watched his every move. Rick Stone reluctantly surrendered his daughter, his expression a complex mixture of doubt and desperate hope. The moment the baby settled into Mac's arms, something remarkable happened. Mac cradled Emma expertly, supporting her head with one hand, while he used his other to gently apply pressure to specific points on her back. He began to hum, not a lullaby, but a low, rhythmic pattern that vibrated in his chest. His body swayed almost imperceptibly, a subtle rocking motion that seemed to exist outside the turbulence of the plane. She's probably got gas, Mac said quietly, his fingers making small circular motions between the baby's shoulder blades. My sister was the same way. Sometimes it's not about what they need, it's about how their body feels. Emma's screams gradually subsided to hiccuping sobs, her tiny fists still clenched but her face relaxing from its alarming shade of red. Rick stared in disbelief as Mac continued his gentle ministrations, speaking to the baby in a low, soothing voice. There you go. That feels better, doesn't it? All that pressure building up inside, nowhere to go. I bet you tried to tell them, but nobody understood. It's frustrating when no one gets what you're saying. A few more minutes of Mac's mysterious technique, and Emma's eyes began to droop. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. The entire first-class cabin seemed to exhale collectively as the blessed silence settled over them. "How did you?" Rick began, his voice hushed with amazement. Mac carefully transferred the now drowsy baby back to her father's arms. "My mom works double shifts. I helped raise my sister from when she was a newborn. Some things you just learn by doing." Rick adjusted his hold on Emma, trying to mimic Mac's technique. "I have a team of experts, pediatricians, child development specialists, and none of them showed me that." A slight smile touched Mac's lips. "With all due respect, sir, some things you can't learn from experts. You have to learn them from experience." The flight attendant who had earlier prevented Mac from entering first class now hovered uncertainly nearby, witnessing the exchange. Her earlier suspicion had transformed into something like embarrassment. "Man," Rick said, studying Mac with new interest, "I believe I owe you a debt of gratitude." He shifted Emma to one arm and extended his hand. "Rick Stone." "I know who you are, sir," Mac replied, shaking the offered hand firmly. "I'm Mac Johnson." "Well, Mac Johnson, you just saved everyone on this flight from a collective nervous breakdown, myself included." Rick gestured to the empty first-class seat beside his own. "Please join me for the remainder of the flight. I'd like to hear more about these techniques of yours." Mac hesitated, glancing back toward economy. "My bag, I'll have it brought up," Rick said, nodding to the flight attendant who hurried to comply. As Mac settled into the leather seat, wider than any chair in his apartment, the contrast between his morning and present circumstance wasn't lost on him. Just hours ago, his mother had scraped together taxi fare to send him off in style. Now he was sitting in first class beside one of the wealthiest men in America. "So Mac," Rick began once Emma was securely sleeping in the bassinet the flight attendant had finally set up. "What brings you on this flight to Europe? College tour? Family vacation?" Mac straightened slightly. "Chess tournament, sir. The World Youth Chess Championship in London." Rick's eyebrows rose with genuine surprise. "Chess, you're a player?" "Yes, sir. Internationally ranked junior master." A calculating look entered Rick's eyes, the same expression he wore when assessing potential acquisitions. "Fascinating. And yet you also possess these rather unusual childcare skills." Mac met the Millionaire's gaze directly. "Where I come from, you learn to be good at many things. Specialization is a luxury." Something in his tone caused Rick to tilt his head, reassessing. "Southside Chicago, based on your accent. Competitive chess programs aren't common there, are they?" "No, sir. My elementary school had one teacher who ran a club after hours. Mr. Caswell, Vietnam vet who learned chess from a Russian prisoner of war." Mac's fingers absently arranged the cocktail napkin into perfect right angles. "He said I had the best tactical mind he'd seen in 30 years of teaching. And this tournament in London, it's significant. Full college scholarship if I place in the top 3, Mac said, his voice carefully neutral despite the stakes, plus potential sponsorship for the Grandmaster track. Rick nodded slowly, processing this information with the same attention he'd give a business proposal. "And your parents, they must be very proud." A shadow crossed Mac's face. "My mom is. She works as a CNA double shifts to keep us afloat since my dad's been gone." "Gone," Rick echoed, then understanding dawned. "I see." An uncomfortable silence settled between them, highlighted by the gentle hum of the engines and the soft breathing of the sleeping baby. "Mr. Stone," Mac said finally, "I should probably return to my seat. I have some strategies to review before landing." Rick's hand moved to stop him. "Nonsense. The least I can do is offer you a comfortable seat for the duration. Besides," his eyes flickered to his sleeping daughter, "I may need your expertise again before we land." As if on cue, the plane hit a pocket of turbulence, causing Emma to stir. Both men froze, watching anxiously as she shifted in the bassinet, then settled back into sleep. "Tell me about chess," Rick said quietly, his gaze still on his daughter. "I've always found it fascinating, but never had the patience to master it." Mac relaxed slightly on familiar ground now. "It's not really about patience, sir. It's about seeing patterns that others miss. An understanding that every move has consequences that ripple across the entire board. Like business," Rick mused. "And life," Mac added. Their conversation flowed more easily after that, moving from chess theory to business strategy, from Mac's tournament preparations to Rick's early days as an entrepreneur. The vast differences in their backgrounds and experiences seemed less significant with each passing hour, as they discovered unexpected commonalities in their approaches to problems and challenges. Emma woke once, fussing slightly, and Mac demonstrated his techniques again, explaining each movement to an attentive Rick. "It's about pressure points," he said. "Same principle as chess, really. Understanding the underlying structure and how different elements connect." Midway through the flight, as they shared the surprisingly decent first-class meal, Rick posed a question that had clearly been on his mind. "You mentioned a scholarship. I assume that means college is otherwise out of reach," Mac finished. "Financially, yes. My grades are good enough for admissions, but even with financial aid, the top programs are expensive, and those are the ones with the best chess teams." Rick nodded thoughtfully, cutting his steak with precise movements. "Which schools are you considering?" "MIT has shown interest. Also Stanford and Northwestern." Mac shrugged slightly. "Depends on how I do in London." "All excellent institutions," Rick said. "I dropped out of MIT my sophomore year to start my first company." A hint of wistfulness crept into his voice. "Sometimes I wonder how things might have been different if I'd stayed." "Would you have built Stone Tech? Perhaps not. At least not in the same way." Rick took a sip of his wine. "But there's value in completing what you start, in having a foundation before you build." As the flight progressed, other passengers occasionally glanced their way, curious about the unlikely pair engaged in such intense conversation. The same flight attendant who had earlier blocked Mac's path now served him with deferential attention, having witnessed Rick's obvious respect for the young man. 4 hours into their conversation, as the plane began its initial descent over the Atlantic, Rick asked about Mac's chess set. Mac produced the magnetic travel board from his pocket, setting it up on the tray table between them. "Care for a game?" he offered. "Fair warning, I won't throw the match even for a first-class upgrade." Rick laughed, a genuine sound rarely heard in his boardrooms. "I wouldn't expect you to, and I wouldn't learn anything if you did." They played quickly, Rick displaying more skill than he'd initially suggested, though Mac identified weaknesses in his strategy within the first few moves. Rather than exploiting them immediately, he used the game as a teaching opportunity, explaining principles and tactics as they emerged on the board. "You're not playing to win," Rick observed after 20 minutes. "I'm playing to teach," Mac corrected. "Different objective, different strategy." Rick studied him with renewed interest. "Most people in your position would take the opportunity to beat a multi-millionaire at chess." Ego boost. Mac captured Rick's bishop with a precise move. "My coach says playing to your opponent's level teaches you nothing. Neither does crushing someone with less experience." He gestured to the board. "This way we both learn something." The game concluded with Rick's inevitable defeat, though more gracefully than it might have been. As they reset the pieces, Emma began to stir again in her bassinet. "Perfect timing," Rick said, lifting his daughter carefully. "We'll be landing soon." Mac watched as the multimillionaire attempted to apply the soothing techniques he demonstrated earlier. Rick's movements were awkward but earnest, his focus complete as he tried to prevent another crying episode. Firm but gentle, Mac coached quietly. "Babies can sense tension. If you're anxious, she'll pick up on it." Rick adjusted his approach, and Emma responded positively, gurgling contentedly in her father's arms. The look of triumph on Rick's face was not unlike his expression after making a particularly good move during their chess game. "You're a natural teacher, Mac," he said. "Have you considered that as a career path?" Mac shook his head. "Not seriously. In my neighborhood, opportunities are limited." "Opportunities can be created," Rick countered. "That's what entrepreneurs do." As the captain announced their final approach to Paris CDG Airport, Rick shifted Emma to his shoulder and regarded Mac thoughtfully. "I have a proposition for you if you're willing to hear it." Mac raised an eyebrow, his expression cautious. "I'm listening." "Your chess tournament in London concludes when?" "Sunday afternoon, assuming I make the finals." "And you're returning to Chicago after that?" Mac nodded. "I'm proposing a detour," Rick said. "My wife and I will be in Paris for a week before returning to the States. Given your evident skills with Emma, I'd like to offer you a temporary position as her caretaker during our stay. Fully compensated, of course, at well above market rate." Mac blinked, taken aback. "You want to hire me as a nanny?" "I prefer childcare consultant," Rick said, with a hint of a smile. "The position includes private accommodation at the Four Seasons, Paris, all expenses covered, and a salary that should significantly supplement your college fund, regardless of the tournament outcome." The offer hung in the air between them, unexpected and life-altering in its potential. Mac's mind raced through calculations and considerations. The extra time away from home, the prestigious hotel, the compensation that could change his family's financial situation overnight. But beneath these practical matters ran a deeper current of recognition. Rick Stone, a man who could hire anyone in the world, was offering him a position of trust with his most precious possession, his child. "May I have some time to consider it?" Mac asked. his voice steady despite his internal turmoil, and I'd need to discuss it with my mother. Of course, Rick nodded, reaching into his jacket pocket for a business card. My private number. Let me know your decision after your tournament. As the plane touched down in Paris, jostling slightly on the runway, Rick settled Emma more securely in his arms and turned to Mac with an expression of genuine gratitude. Regardless of your decision, I want to thank you, Mac, not just for helping with Emma, but for the conversation. It's been illuminating, Mac nodded, understanding the unspoken layers in the Millionaire's words. Sometimes the most valuable moves in chess aren't the ones that capture pieces, Mr. Stone. They're the ones that change the structure of the entire board. As they prepared to disembark, the first-class passengers gathering their belongings, Rick hesitated. One more thing, Mac. Would you be willing to teach me those techniques properly before we part ways? I have a feeling I'll need them. It would be my pleasure, Mac replied, and for the first time since boarding the plane in Chicago, he felt the weight of expectation lift from his shoulders. Whatever came next, the chess tournament, Rick's job offer, his future beyond this unexpected encounter, he had already won something valuable: recognition, respect, the acknowledgement that wisdom comes in many forms from many sources. And as they walked together through the airport, the multi-millionaire and the chess prodigy from Southside Chicago, something fundamental had shifted between them. A connection formed miles above the Atlantic bridging worlds that rarely intersected on the ground below. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to our channel and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Now, let's continue with our story and see what happens next. Kate Stone was waiting at the private terminal adjacent to CDG Airport, her sleek silhouette a study in controlled impatience as she checked her watch for the third time in 5 minutes. When the doors finally opened and Rick appeared with Emma, her expression morphed from irritation to confusion at the sight of the tall young man walking beside her husband. "Rick," she said, air-kissing his cheek while taking Emma into her arms with practiced ease. "I was expecting Marie. Who is this?" Rick performed the introductions, his tone revealing an unusual level of deference as he explained the circumstances of their meeting. Kate's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose fractionally as she assessed Mac, her initial skepticism gradually softening as she noticed her daughter's contentment. "You managed the entire flight without a meltdown?" she asked, bouncing Emma gently. "That's practically miraculous. Last time we flew with her, the pilot threatened to make an emergency landing. Mac has quite the gift," Rick said. "In fact, I've offered him a position during our Paris stay, pending his decision after his chess tournament in London." Kate's surprise was evident, but years in corporate and social circles had taught her to adapt quickly. "Chess tournament?" Mac explained his circumstances with the same quiet confidence he displayed on the plane, watching as Kate processed this unexpected development. Unlike her husband, whose interest had been primarily pragmatic, Kate seemed genuinely curious about Mac's background and achievements. "Junior international master at 18, she mused. "Impressive. Rick barely manages to concentrate on one chess game without checking his phone." This gentle jab at her husband revealed a warmth beneath Kate's polished exterior that made Mac revise his initial impression of her as merely another wealthy socialite. "The car is waiting," Kate said, glancing at her watch again. "Mac, can we drop you somewhere? The hotel, perhaps?" "Actually," Rick interjected, "I've arranged for Mac to be taken to the train station. His tournament in London starts tomorrow." Mac nodded gratefully. "The Eurostar leaves in 2 hours. I should have plenty of time." "Well, then," Kate said, shifting Emma to her other hip, "good luck with your tournament, and I hope we'll see you again soon." The sincerity in her voice suggested she meant it. As they prepared to part ways, Rick extended his hand to Mac. The handshake was firm, businessman to businessman, but there was something else in Rick's eyes. A recognition, perhaps, of something valuable discovered in an unexpected place. "Remember," Rick said quietly, "the offer stands regardless of the tournament outcome, though I suspect you'll do quite well." Mac thanked him, shouldered his backpack, and headed toward the waiting car Rick had arranged. As he walked away, he heard Emma begin to fuss in her mother's arms. "Here," Rick said behind him. "Let me show you something, Kate. It's all about the pressure points." Mac smiled to himself as he slid into the sleek town car. Whatever happened in London, something significant had already shifted in his world. A door had opened, revealing possibilities he hadn't imagined when he boarded the plane in Chicago. The Eurostar sped through the French countryside, fields and villages blurring past the windows as Mac reviewed his opening strategies one last time. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother, landed safely. He typed back quickly, In France, taking train to London now, you won't believe what happened on the flight. As he began composing a longer message explaining the extraordinary encounter, another text appeared on his screen. This one from an unknown number. This is Rick Stone. Just wanted to wish you luck tomorrow. Emma says thanks again. Max stared at the message, a smile tugging at his lips. He saved the number to his contacts before replying, "Thank you, sir. Give Emma my best." After a moment's hesitation, he added, "Remember firm but gentle pressure and breathe with her, not against her." The response came almost immediately. Sage advice for business negotiations as well. We'll keep you posted on my progress. By the time the Eurostar pulled into Street Pancras station, London's evening lights were blinking on across the city. Mac collected his backpack, double-checking that his chess set and tournament credentials were secure, and stepped onto the platform. The weight of tomorrow's competition settled back onto his shoulders, but it felt different now, balanced by the unexpected validation of the day's events. The tournament hotel was modest compared to the luxury Rick had offered in Paris, but the lobby buzzed with chess energy. Players from around the world hunched over boards discussing strategies in multiple languages, sizing up the competition. Mac checked in, received his contestant packet, and headed to his room to prepare for the morning's first match. As he laid out his tournament clothes, the one good suit his mother had found at a second-hand store and altered to fit him perfectly, his phone buzzed again. This time it was his coach, Frank Desmond, a gruff former champion who'd taken Mac under his wing 4 years earlier. "Arrived safely. Get some sleep. Remember what we practiced." First-round opponent is Dmitry Volkov, Russian junior champion. Strong opening game but gets impatient in the middle. Make him wait. Mac replied with a thumbs-up emoji, knowing Coach Desmond's aversion to unnecessary words. Then he set his alarm, laid out his tournament materials, and tried to quiet his mind for sleep, but as he drifted off, it wasn't chess positions that filled his thoughts. It was the image of Rick Stone, multi-millionaire CEO, learning to soothe his baby daughter with techniques passed down from Mac's mother, who had learned them from her mother before her. Knowledge flowing across boundaries of class and race and privilege, connecting 3 generations in an unexpected lineage of wisdom. Morning came too quickly, London's gray dawn filtering through thin hotel curtains as Mac's alarm chirped insistently. He rose, went through his tournament routine with methodical precision, and headed down to the competition hall where the day's pairings were posted. As his coach had predicted, his first opponent was Dmitry Volkov, the Russian prodigy whose aggressive style had dominated European junior championships for the past 2 years. Max studied the tournament bracket, mentally calculating his path to the finals when a familiar name caught his eye. Lawrence Kingsley III, American junior champion from New Hampshire, son of a senator and Mac's longtime nemesis on the circuit. Their last encounter at the Nationals had ended in controversy when Lawrence's father had questioned the officiating after Mac's victory. The implied accusation of favoritism had stung, though the tournament committee had firmly rejected the complaint. Lawrence himself stood at the other end of the hall, surrounded by his entourage, coach, assistant, psychological consultant, all provided by his family's considerable resources. He caught Mac's eye and smirked, a gesture loaded with the same dismissive confidence he displayed at every previous encounter. Mac turned away, focusing instead on his own preparation. Coach Desmond appeared at his elbow, coffee in hand, his perpetual scowl firmly in place. "Ignore the Kingsley kid," he growled. "He's in your head only if you let him in. Focus on Volkov, 1 game at a time." The first round began with ceremonial formality, handshakes, clock settings, the hushed atmosphere of concentrated thought descending over the hall. Dmitry Volkov played as expected, aggressive and confident, pushing for early advantage. Mac responded with the patient strategy he and Coach Desmond had developed, allowing Volkov to extend himself, then capitalizing on the subtle weaknesses that emerged. 3 hours later, Mac had his first victory. By evening, he had advanced through the preliminary rounds to secure his place in the next day's quarterfinals. Lawrence Kingsley had also advanced, setting up the possibility of a semi-final confrontation if both continued their winning streaks. Back in his hotel room that night, Mac found a message from Rick. "How did the first day go?" he replied with a brief summary of his matches and standings, surprised by the multi-millionaire's continued interest. Rick's response came quickly. "Excellent progress. Emma has slept through the night twice using your techniques. Kate thinks I've been replaced by a body double. Keep us posted on tomorrow's matches." The exchange left Mac smiling as he prepared for bed. The connection formed on the plane seemed to be evolving into something like mentorship or perhaps even friendship, an outcome he never could have predicted when he boarded in Chicago. The tournament's second day brought increased pressure as the field narrowed. Mac advanced through his quarterfinal match against a talented player from India, his focus absolute as he maneuvered through a complex middle game to force a resignation at move 37. The victory put him into the semifinals and, as fate would have it, face-to-face with Lawrence Kingsley III. Their semifinal match drew a crowd, the history between the two players adding drama to the already tense competition. Lawrence arrived, flanked by his support team, while Mac sat alone, Coach Desmond having been called away to assist another of his students who had advanced in the junior division. "All by yourself today, Johnson," Lawrence commented as they set up the board. "No entourage from the south side." Mac met his gaze calmly. I think more clearly without distractions." Lawrence's mouth tightened at the implied criticism, but further conversation was cut short by the tournament director's arrival to start the clock. The game began with Lawrence playing white, opening with an aggressive Sicilian variation that had become his signature. For nearly 2 hours, they battled across the 64 squares, each move a calculated risk, each position a complex puzzle of possibilities. Lawrence played well, forcing Mac to defend a series of attacks that tested the limits of his preparation. But in the critical moment, when Lawrence overextended in pursuit of a tactical advantage, Mac found the counterattack that Coach Desmond had drilled into him over countless practice sessions. The endgame was mathematical in its precision, Mac converting his slight advantage into a winning position with the patience that had become his hallmark. When Lawrence finally tipped over his king and resignation, the crowd's murmur rose to an appreciative buzz. "Good game," Mac said, extending his hand across the board. Lawrence hesitated before accepting the handshake, his grip just a fraction too tight. "Lucky counter," he muttered. "Not luck," Mac replied quietly. "Pattern recognition. The same position came up in your match against Petrov last year at the Invitational. You made the same choice then with the same result." Lawrence's eyes widened, slightly surprised, replacing resentment for a moment. "You studied my games." "All of them," Mac confirmed. "Just as I'm sure you studied mine." A grudging respect flickered across Lawrence's face. "Finals tomorrow, then, against Zimmerman." He nodded toward the adjacent board where the German champion had just secured his own place in the finals. "He's been unstoppable this season." "Everyone's stoppable," Max said. "It's just a matter of finding the right move at the right time." As he gathered his materials, Mac's phone buzzed with a text from Rick. "Semi-final result," he typed back quickly. "Victory. Finals tomorrow against Zimmerman." Rick's response was immediate. "Excellent. One more to go. Emma and I are cheering for you from Paris." The attached photo showed Rick holding Emma, both giving thumbs up to the camera, the Eiffel Tower visible through a window behind them. The casual warmth of the image, so at odds with Rick Stone's public persona, brought a smile to Mac's face as he headed back to his hotel. That evening, as he reviewed his notes on Zimmerman's playing style, a call came through from his mother. Her voice was thick with emotion when he told her about making the finals. "I knew it," Sarah said, pride radiating through the connection. "I told everyone at work my son's going to be a champion." "Just the finals, Mom," Mac cautioned, the same reflexive modesty he displayed in their bathroom days earlier resurfacing. "Zimmerman's tough." She hummed, unconvinced, "And I suppose you getting to the finals of an international tournament is just another day too," Mac laughed, recognizing his own words reflected back at him. "Point taken. How's Zoe?" "Missing her brother. Told all her friends you're becoming a chess master in London." "Grandmaster," Mac corrected automatically. "And that's still years away even if I win tomorrow. One step at a time," Sarah agreed. "Oh, before I forget, there was a call for you from some foundation about a possible sponsorship." "I took down the number," Mac frowned. "What foundation?" "Stone Foundation for Educational Excellence said they were considering you for their chess development program, wanted to talk after the tournament." Mac's pulse quickened. The Stone Foundation was Rick's philanthropic organization known for its selective but generous support of promising students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Had Rick already set this in motion, regardless of Mac's decision about the Paris offer? "Did they leave a contact name?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "Someone named Vivian, very professional sounding. I have her number here somewhere." After finishing the call with his mother, Max sat on the edge of his hotel bed, turning this new development over in his mind. The chess scholarship had always been his focus, his path to college and beyond. But Rick's interest, both the Paris offer and now this potential foundation sponsorship, opened doors he hadn't even known existed. His phone buzzed again with a text from Rick. "Get some rest. Big day tomorrow. Remember what you told me about Emma. tension transfers. Stay calm. Trust your preparation. The parallels between chess strategy and baby-soothing techniques brought a smile to Mac's face as he prepared for bed. Two worlds that had seemed entirely separate now, connected through unexpected principles. Finals day dawned clear and crisp, London's autumn sunshine streaming through the tournament hall's high windows as spectators filled the viewing area. The match between Mac and Zimmerman had been promoted as the highlight of the youth championship. The precision-focused German champion versus the intuitive American challenger. As Mac took his place at the board, he was surprised to see Coach Desmond in the front row of the audience, giving him a gruff nod of encouragement. Beside him sat an unfamiliar woman in a tailored suit, who Mac somehow knew must be Vivian, Rick's assistant. Her presence confirmed that the Stone Foundation's interest was real, not just a product of his mother's misunderstanding. The final match was scheduled for 5 hours, with potential extensions if needed, a test of endurance as much as skill. Zimmerman played white, opening with a conservative queen's gambit that set the tone for a strategic battle. 2 hours in, the position remained balanced. Neither player willing to risk the aggressive moves that might create weaknesses. Mac found himself drawing on the same patience he described to Rick, the ability to wait for the right moment, to recognize patterns as they emerged from apparent chaos. In the third hour, Zimmerman began pressing for advantage, perhaps sensing fatigue in his opponent. But Mac had trained for this, pushing through the mental exhaustion to find clarity in the critical positions. When Zimmerman finally overcommitted to an attack on Mac's queen side, the counter was there, subtle but devastating, a knight sacrifice that led to a winning endgame combination. The tournament hall erupted in applause as Zimmerman extended his hand in resignation, genuine respect in his eyes. "Brilliant sacrifice," he said in accented English. "I did not see it until too late." "Thank you," Mac replied, the reality of his victory still sinking in. "Your middle game pressure was intense." As the tournament officials prepared for the awards ceremony, Mac found himself surrounded by well-wishers, reporters, and representatives from chess organizations. Coach Desmond pushed through the crowd to grip his shoulder tightly, the closest thing to a hug the taciturn man ever offered. "Knew you had it in you," he growled. "Perfect execution of our strategy." Before Mac could respond, Vivian appeared at his elbow, smartphone in hand. "Congratulations, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Stone would like to speak with you when you have a moment." She handed him the phone and Rick's voice came through clearly despite the noisy hall. "Mac, spectacular victory. We watched the live stream of the final moves. Even I could appreciate the brilliance of that knight's sacrifice." "Thank you, sir," Mac said, still processing the convergence of his chess triumph with this unlikely connection to the multi-millionaire. "I appreciate you taking the time to watch." "Wouldn't have missed it," Rick replied. "Vivian has information about the Foundation's chess development program. We'd like to discuss it with you in Paris if you're still considering our offer." The awards ceremony was a blur of handshakes, photographs, and the weight of the championship trophy in Mac's hands. The tournament director announced the scholarship award that had been his primary goal, but it now seemed just one part of a larger picture taking shape around him. Afterward, as the hall cleared and Mac gathered his belongings, Vivian approached with precise efficiency. "Mr. Stone has arranged for the Eurostar to Paris this evening, if that suits your schedule. The Foundation is very interested in discussing your future development beyond the immediate scholarship." Mac thought of his mother and sister waiting for news in Chicago of the return flight he'd booked for the following day of the school he'd be missing if he extended his trip. "Could I make a call first?" he asked. Sarah answered on the first ring as if she'd been waiting by the phone. When Mac told her about his victory, her joyful shout was so loud he had to hold the phone away from his ear. "I knew it!" she exclaimed. "My champion." When he carefully explained the situation with Rick Stone, the Paris offer, and now the Foundation's interest, her initial excitement gave way to thoughtful consideration. "This Stone man," she said cautiously. "He's offering you some kind of job with his Foundation." "Two things, actually," Mac clarified. "A short-term position helping with his daughter in Paris this week, and potentially longer-term support through his educational foundation for chess development and college." Sarah was silent for a moment, processing. "And you trust him? This multi-millionaire who suddenly wants to help?" It was a fair question, one Mac had asked himself repeatedly since the unusual offer on the plane. "I think I do," he said slowly. "He could have just thanked me for helping with his daughter and gone on his way. This feels genuine." Another pause. Then Sarah's voice softened. "You've always been a good judge of character, Mac. Better than me sometimes. If you feel this is right, then you should explore it. What about school? I'd be missing at least another week." For an opportunity like this, they'll understand. I'll talk to your principal." Her tone became gently teasing. Not every day my son gets offered a position by one of the richest men in America. After ending the call with his mother, Mac turned to Vivian, who had been waiting patiently nearby. "I'd like to accept Mr. Stone's offer. Both offers." Vivian nodded, a small smile breaking through her professional demeanor. "Excellent. The car is waiting whenever you're ready." As the Eurostar carried him back toward Paris that evening, championship trophy carefully stowed in his backpack, Mac reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought him to this moment. A crying baby on a transatlantic flight. A desperate father at the end of his rope. A young man with skills learned out of necessity rather than choice. His phone buzzed with a message from Rick. "Congratulations again on your victory. We're looking forward to welcoming you to Paris tomorrow. Kate has arranged accommodations at the hotel, and Emma is excited for your chess lessons." Mac smiled at the joke about the 8-month-old's chess aspirations, typing back. "Thank you, sir. Looking forward to it." Though Emma may need to work on her fine motor skills before mastering the knight move, Rick's response came quickly. "She's a stone, ahead of schedule on everything." "See you tomorrow, champion." The title felt strange but not unwelcome. Not just of the chess tournament, but of an opportunity that extended far beyond the 64 squares of a chessboard. As the French countryside blurred past the train windows, Mac thought about the parallel journeys that had brought him and Rick Stone to that moment on the plane. The multi-millionaire entrepreneur and the Southside chess prodigy, each carrying their own burdens and expectations. Two lives that would never have intersected, but for a baby's cry and a young man's decision to step forward when no one else would. In chess, they called it a fork, a single move that created multiple threats, forcing the opponent to choose which piece to save and which to sacrifice. But sometimes, rarely, there came a move that changed everything, that transformed the entire structure of the game and created possibilities where none had existed before. Mac Johnson had made such a move when he stood up from his economy seat to offer help to a desperate father. Rick Stone had made such a move when he looked past his preconceptions to recognize value in an unexpected source. And now, as the Eurostar sped toward Paris and the next chapter of this unlikely connection, both of their lives had been permanently altered. Their respective boards rearranged in ways neither could have anticipated when they boarded a plane in Chicago with such different destinations in mind. If you've enjoyed this story so far, please subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We're about to reach the conclusion of this incredible journey. The Four Seasons Paris stood like a palace amid the elegant streets of Paris's 8th arrondissement, its limestone facade and Art Deco details speaking to a century of luxury and tradition. As the hotel's sleek town car delivered Mac from the train station, he felt the familiar weight of being an outsider, the same sensation he'd experienced at his first chess tournaments in wealthy suburbs, at academic competitions where other students arrived in private school uniforms. The doorman greeted him with practiced courtesy, though Mac didn't miss the subtle assessment in his glance. Taking in the well-worn backpack, the careful way Mac handled his tournament trophy, but any awkwardness dissipated when the hotel manager stepped forward, extending his hand. "Mr. Johnson, welcome to the Four Seasons Paris. Mr. Stone has informed us of your arrival. Allow me to escort you to your accommodations." The accommodations proved to be a suite larger than his family's entire apartment, with tall windows overlooking a courtyard garden. Fresh flowers adorned marble-top tables, and a welcome basket contained an assortment of French delicacies, alongside a handwritten note from Kate Stone. "Congratulations on your victory. We look forward to seeing you at breakfast tomorrow. Rest well." Mac set down his backpack, placed his trophy carefully on the writing desk, and stood motionless in the center of the suite, momentarily overwhelmed by the stark contrast between his morning in the modest London hotel and this evening in Parisian luxury. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother, landed safely in Paris. He sent back a photo of the suite with the caption, "Safe and sound." "Room's bigger than our apartment. Love you." Her response made him smile. "Don't get too used to it, but enjoy every minute. You've earned it." Had he earned it? The question lingered as he explored the suite, running his fingers over fine fabrics and furniture that probably cost more than his mother made in a year. His chess victory had earned him the scholarship that felt clear and legitimate. But this, the luxury, the connection to the Stone family, the sudden interest of a multi-millionaire's foundation, all stemmed from a simple act of kindness on a plane. Was that something to be earned or merely the right thing that anyone should have done? Morning brought answers, or at least the beginning of them, when Mac joined the Stone family for breakfast in their penthouse suite. Rick greeted him with a warmth that seemed to genuinely surprise Kate, who watched their interaction with thoughtful interest. Emma strapped into a high chair, cooed and waved her arms at the sight of Mac. "She remembers you," Kate remarked, sipping her coffee. "That's remarkable given how young She Island babies are more perceptive than we give them credit for," Mac replied, accepting a cup of coffee from the suite's butler. "They pick up on energy and intention, not just faces and voices." Rick nodded, his expression serious. "That's precisely what I wanted to discuss with you, Mac. This perception you have, it's unusual." Over breakfast, Rick outlined his proposal in greater detail. The short-term position would involve Mac staying in Paris for the week, helping with Emma, while Rick and Kate attended a series of business functions and charitable events. The longer-term opportunity through the Stone Foundation would provide not just financial support for college, but mentorship, internship placements, and development of what Rick called Mac's unique interpersonnelle intelligence. "I've built my career on recognizing talent in unexpected places," Rick explained, cutting his omelet with precise movements. "What you demonstrated on that plane wasn't just a knack for childcare, it was emotional intelligence, problem-solving under pressure, and the ability to bridge worlds that rarely connect. Those are rare skills, Mac. Skills my foundation and my company value highly." Kate leaned forward, her initial reserve now replaced with genuine engagement. "What Rick is trying to say in his typically roundabout business fashion is that we'd like to invest in your future, beyond chess, beyond college, though those remain important components." Mac set down his coffee cup, carefully processing their words. "May I ask why? I appreciate the opportunity, but there must be thousands of talented young people you could support." Rick and Kate exchanged a glance that contained an entire conversation. It was Kate who finally answered. "Frankly, Mac, what you did on that plane forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about our assumptions, about how we've structured our lives to insulate ourselves from certain realities. What my wife is diplomatically trying to express," Rick added, "is that we've built walls around our world, walls that keep out perspectives and wisdom we clearly need." He gestured toward Emma, who was happily mashing banana into her high chair tray. "We have experts and consultants for everything related to our daughter, yet none of them could do what you did instinctively." "That's not entirely fair," Mac said, surprising himself by defending the unknown experts. "They probably didn't have the specific experience I had with my sister. Different backgrounds lead to different kinds of knowledge." "Precisely," Kate said, her expression approving. "And that's why diversity of experience and perspective matters, not just as some corporate talking point, but in practical, everyday ways." Rick nodded, his gaze thoughtful as it rested on Mac. "The foundation program I'm proposing isn't charity, Mac. It's an investment in you, certainly, but also in what you represent. The talent and potential that exists beyond the narrow pipelines traditional institutions recognize." As the conversation continued, Mac began to understand that what had started as a chance encounter on a plane had evolved into something more significant for the Stone family, a catalyst for reassessing their approach to privilege, opportunity, and the invisible barriers that separated their world from his. The week in Paris unfolded with a rhythm that balanced Mac's responsibilities to Emma with opportunities to explore the city and continue his chess studies. Rick had arranged for him to meet with a French grandmaster for several coaching sessions, while Kate ensured he experienced cultural highlights beyond the typical tourist attractions. Caring for Emma proved both rewarding and illuminating. The baby responded to him with consistent delight, and Mac found himself teaching both Rick and Kate the techniques his mother had passed down. Not just the physical methods of soothing and comfort, but the underlying philosophy of respect and attention. "You listen to her?" Kate observed one evening as she watched Mac calm Emma after a particularly fussy day. "Not just to her cries, but to what she's trying to communicate before she gets upset." Mac nodded, gently working pressure points along Emma's tiny spine. "My mom calls it speaking, baby. It's about recognizing patterns and signals before they escalate, kind of like chess, seeing the position developing before the critical moment arrives." Rick, who had been observing from the doorway, entered the nursery with uncharacteristic hesitation. Would you show me again? I've been practicing, but I can't seem to get it right." The vulnerability in the Millionaire's request struck Mac deeply. Here was one of the most powerful men in the business world, accustomed to commanding rooms and making decisions affecting thousands of lives, asking for guidance from an 18-year-old from Southside Chicago. Of course, Mac said carefully, transferring Emma to her father's arm. It's all about confidence in your movements. Babies sense uncertainty immediately. As he guided Rick's hands, demonstrating the proper pressure and rhythm, Mac reflected on how this moment inverted the traditional power dynamics between them. In this room, with this specific knowledge, he was the authority. His experience valued precisely because it came from outside Rick's usual spheres of influence. By the end of the week, as Mac prepared to return to Chicago, the relationship between him and the Stone family had evolved into something neither side could have anticipated. Rick and Kate had come to rely on his insights about Emma, while Mac had gained a new perspective on the world of privilege and power the Stones inhabited, its advantages and limitations, its insulations and blind spots. On his final evening in Paris, Rick invited Mac to join him for a walk along the Seine. As they strolled past the Pont Neuf street lamps reflecting in the dark water, Rick broached the subject they'd both been circling. "The Foundation's offer remains open," he said. "Full support through college, mentorship, internships at Stone Tech if you're interested. No strings attached, regardless of your career path." Mac nodded, watching a tour boat glide beneath the bridge, its lights creating ripples of gold on the water's surface. "It's an incredible opportunity, one that could change everything for me and my family. But," Rick prompted, hearing the unspoken reservation in Mac's tone. "But I need to be sure I'm accepting it for the right reasons," Mac said carefully, "that it's not just compensation for helping with Emma, or worse, some kind of charity case that makes you feel better about yourself." Rick stopped walking, turning to face Mac directly. In the lamplight, the lines of privilege and power that usually define the multi-millionaire's face seemed softened, revealing the human complexity beneath. "Let me be clear, Mac. What I'm offering isn't charity or compensation. It's recognition of exceptional talent and character. Same recognition I'd give to any promising young person I encountered, regardless of circumstances." He paused, choosing his next words with care. "The difference is that our paths would never have crossed without that flight. The worlds we inhabit are separated by more than just economic barriers. They're separated by systems designed to keep them distinct." Mac considered this, understanding the truth in Rick's words. "So this is about disrupting those systems." A smile touched Rick's lips. "In a small way, yes. One connection at a time. One recognized talent at a time." He gestured toward the city lights surrounding them. "The greatest waste in our society is human potential left undeveloped because of artificial barriers. My foundation can't fix the entire system, but it can build bridges where opportunities arise." They resumed walking, silence settling between them as Mac weighed the offer against his concerns about independence, about earned versus granted opportunity, about the complex dynamics of privilege and assistance. "There's something else you should know," Rick said eventually. "Something Kate and I discussed after watching you with Emma this week. We're establishing a new initiative through the Foundation, a program to identify and develop emotional intelligence and caregiving skills in underserved communities." Mac glanced at him, surprised. Based on what you showed us," Rick confirmed. "The wisdom passed down through families like yours, the practical knowledge that exists outside formal education systems. We want to create pathways for that wisdom to be recognized, valued, and shared more widely." The magnitude of this development, a multi-millionaire's foundation launching an initiative inspired by the skills Mac's mother had taught him, left him momentarily speechless. "The program would benefit from your input," Rick continued. "Not now, perhaps, but after college, when you've had time to develop your own path and perspective." As they completed their circuit along the river and turned back toward the hotel, Mac felt the pieces of his decision falling into place like a well-executed chess endgame. The Foundation's support would open doors without determining which ones he chose to walk through. The connection to the Stone family would become part of his story without defining it entirely. "I'd be honored to accept the Foundation's support," he said finally, "and to contribute to the new initiative when the time comes." Rick extended his hand and they shook, no longer the desperate father and helpful stranger from the plane, but two individuals recognizing value in each other across the divides that might otherwise have kept them apart. The following morning, as Mac prepared to depart for the airport, Kate presented him with a small box elegantly wrapped in silver paper. "A token of our appreciation," she said, "though it hardly seems adequate." Inside was a chess set unlike any Mac had seen, pieces crafted from carved jade and rose quartz, the board inlaid with mother-of-pearl and ebony. An accompanying card bore a handwritten note for the champion who showed us that the most valuable moves are the ones that change the entire board with gratitude. Rick, Kate, and Emma Stone. As the hotel's car carried him toward CDG Airport, Mac's phone buzzed with messages from his mother and sister, eager for his return, from his chess coach already planning for the next tournament, from classmates curious about his international adventure, and one final text from Rick Stone. Safe travels, Mac. Remember that some connections once formed transcend the circumstances of their beginning. This is just the first move in what I hope will be a long and meaningful game. Looking out at the Paris streets slipping past his window, Mac reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had begun with a baby's cry on a plane and culminated in this moment of transition, returning to his life in Chicago, but with new possibilities, new connections, new understanding of his own value and potential. In chess, the most powerful move isn't always the most obvious or aggressive. Sometimes it's the quiet repositioning that changes the entire structure of the game, opening pathways that weren't visible before, creating connections between previously isolated pieces, transforming the board in ways that ripple through every subsequent decision. On a transatlantic flight, a young man from Southside Chicago had made such a move when he offered help to a desperate father and his crying baby. The ripple effects of that choice had altered not just his own trajectory, but the perspectives and priorities of a powerful family, creating possibilities that extended far beyond any single act of kindness. As the plane lifted off from Paris, carrying Mac back toward the familiar landmarks and challenges of home, he understood that the true value of the connection formed with the Stone family lay not in the material support or opportunities offered, but in the recognition of worth across the boundaries that too often separated potential from opportunity, wisdom from power, one human experience from another. The greatest moves in chess, as in life, are those that build bridges rather than walls, that recognize value in unexpected places and create pathways for that value to transform the entire board. In reaching across the aisle of that first plane, Mac Johnson had made just such a move. And in the game of life, unlike chess, such moves continue to resonate long after the final piece is played. 6 months later, Mac Johnson stood before the MIT admissions board, no longer the uncertain young man who had boarded a plane in Chicago with nothing but hope and a chess set. The Stone Foundation scholarship had opened doors he never knew existed, but it was his own merit that had walked him through them. Behind him lay a trail of tournament victories, academic achievements, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your worth has been recognized by those who matter. Rick Stone had kept his word in ways both expected and surprising. The Foundation's support extended beyond financial assistance to include mentorship opportunities, internship placements, and most importantly, the validation that talent exists in every corner of society, waiting only for the right moment to be discovered. But perhaps the most meaningful outcome had been the friendship that developed between two families from different worlds, bound together by a crying baby and a moment of kindness above the Atlantic. Emma Stone, now 14 months old and taking her first steps, had become the unlikely catalyst for a program that would eventually help thousands of young people like Mac find pathways to opportunity. The Stone Foundation's Community Wisdom Initiative, as it came to be known, had grown from that conversation in Paris into a national program recognizing and developing the emotional intelligence found in communities where formal resources were scarce, but human wisdom ran deep. Mac's mother, Sarah, had been among the first community mentors hired by the program, her decades of experience as a CNA and single mother suddenly valued by institutions that had previously overlooked such expertise. Her gentle techniques for calming distressed children were now being taught in pediatric nursing programs across the country, credited with reducing stress-related incidents in hospital settings by 40%. As for Mac himself, he had learned that the most profound victories aren't always measured in trophies or titles, but in the connections we forge and the barriers we break down. His chess career continued to flourish, but it was his work with the Foundation's youth mentorship program that brought him the deepest satisfaction. Every young person he helped navigate the complex world of academic and professional opportunities was a move in a larger game, one where the objective wasn't to defeat an opponent, but to expand the very definition of what was possible. Standing in that MIT lecture hall, preparing to deliver a guest presentation on pattern recognition in both chess and life, Mac thought about the plane ride that had changed everything. He wondered sometimes if Rick Stone knew, when he made that desperate plea for help with his crying daughter, that he was about to alter the trajectory of two families forever. Probably not. The best moves in life, like in chess, often reveal their true value only in retrospect. His phone buzzed with a message from Rick, watching your MIT presentation online. Emma says to tell you her chess game is improving. She can almost knock over the pieces intentionally now. Proud of how far you've come, champion. Max smiled, typing back, tell Emma I'll give her a proper lesson when I'm back in Chicago. And Mr. Stone, thank you for teaching me that sometimes the most important moves happen when we're not even trying to play the game. The response came immediately. The teacher has become the master. Looking forward to our next match, though I suspect you'll always be several moves ahead. As Mac pocketed his phone and turned to face the eager faces of MIT's brightest students, he realized that this was exactly where he belonged. Not because of where he'd come from or where he was going, but because of the journey itself, the unexpected connections, the bridges built across impossible divides, and the simple truth that wisdom and opportunity should know no boundaries. In chess, every piece has value. Even the humble pawn that can transform into a queen given the right circumstances and enough persistence to reach the other side of the board. Mac Johnson had made that journey, but more importantly, he was now helping others recognize that the game was bigger than any single player and that the most beautiful victories were those that lifted everyone up. The game continued. The board expanded. And somewhere above the Atlantic, the echo of a baby's cry had become the opening note of a symphony that would play for generations to come. Thank you so much for watching our story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. Where are you watching from? We'd love to know. These stories remind us that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change the entire world. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Because in a world that often feels divided, we all need reminders that connection and compassion can bridge any gap.